I'm looking at doing a drawing and getting a little bit of a value structure set up before I would add my colors. So this is my process where I've got my setup ready, I've got my panel ready. I'm working on hot press watercolor paper that I've toned, and then I've added 2 layers of PVA to it, polyvinyl acetate, which just seals the paper. I could do this on a canvas, I could do this on a wood panel, doesn't matter your surface, I'm just using that one for this. My burnt umber here. Now I want to leave a little space for just the environment and for a frame if I was ever to frame this. And when I look at that, I am going to set some limits here. It's really dark. I'm going to set a little bit of limits so I don't go outside any. So I'm just going to look at, I'm just what's called blocking in my longer edges as if I was trying to create a container to put all of that into. So here's the top of my mug, the back top. I'm going to disregard the handle for now, and I'm going to go right down the side of that mug, knowing if I do, I might leave enough room. There, got my fruit. Let's see that. I think this is a little wider. Now I'm going to start to kind of cut my fruit from my cup. What I'm noticing is my cup sits further back in space than the front of my fruit. So as I draw it, I'm going to set my bottom limit for that cup further up in my painting than the bottom of my pear. And I'm looking at how these overlap. Where does the pear cut into the cup? About 1/3 of the way in. So if I want to erase something, I can just take a makeup wedge and go right over a line and it just pulls it right off. I've got an ellipse on that mug, and I'm looking at how far down does that go. So if I put an ellipse in here, let's make this a little more tapered. That pear comes up to about here. Ellipse, you can really just make a diamond for it. Here. So now I'm just basically putting a container around each object and comparing the sizes of those containers along with any of the negative space around here. You know, in my ellipse, it's a little, got some sharp edges to it, so if I want to round those a little more with my makeup wedge, I could just go in like this. Here I'm going to put that handle in, looking at where it comes up. That ellipse has got to be more open. I've got a little bit of an ellipse on the bottom of that vessel also. And my pear out, my pear, does that look wide enough? Another thing with shadow shapes that's helpful, I'm starting to go from a linear drawing now to something that's value-based. So this was linear even though they were large brushes. Now I'm going to kind of mass in my shadow shapes, which gives me another visual cue to see my proportions. I've got about a little over a third of this side is in shadow. And then I've got my cast shadow on my pear. Goes down to about here. I've got my little handle. That now as I add, I'm going to add in a little bit of background. And this is kind of scrubbing in with the bristle brush. This is why you want to use more of a bristle brush for this underlayers, because you can really kind of ream on the brush and do kind of the scumbling stroke. And as I add this background in, what you'll notice is I've kept my edges really soft on everything. That allows me to kind of figure out a little bit better where do I want to actually make that ellipse if I want to, you know, tweak it further into the process. I still know it's there. If I come down here the side of my cup, now my brush is starting to get a little bit dry. So if I go into my mineral spirits, let's get the floor, that's a little dark, but can you see the difference? Just the drippy is a little bit too drippy. But because it's mineral spirits, it's going to dry within a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. But it spreads nicely. As I squint, the background is definitely darker than the, let's get a little more paint on my brush, than the mug, even in shadow. So this looks really messy, but it does give me some structure. And it's thin enough that I should be able to go right over it with my color layers. So what I can do, another method is with my brush, now I can get the paint off, or I can use a clean brush. And I can come in, and if I want to make anything a little clearer, I can just do a kind of that negative painting you were talking about, Maren, and just pull stuff out. I'm not looking to get back to the white of the canvas because, of course, I started with a toned panel. But let's see, let's do that pear. I got a little top plane on the pear, my sides. So I want to push that back. So everything is really wet. That's just the wonderful part about this. But it helps me get my drawing in. If I want to push that, I'm not going too far past my limits. I don't want to do that. Maybe I need to push this pear a little further out. I do have the shadow in there, so I've got to remember that's part of it. And let's get this area a little clarified. Got a cast shadow underneath. And then a cast shadow over here. I don't need to put all that darkness in yet, but so now I could wait like 10 minutes, 15 minutes and kind of wipe it down, or I could go ahead, mix my colors and just get started. But I've got some sense of my shadow on my pear. Correct this here. Of course, as I look at it longer and longer, if I stepped away, I could come back and be like, oh my goodness, look at this or look at that, or all these things that might be off. It's really the use of the medium. How wet or dry your brush is what makes this process easier or more difficult. It's almost too wet right now. So you see how much I'm having to wipe off the brush just to get this dry, because I want to just soften that transition for the shadow. All right, let's go dry it off, pull it out. And it's my bottom of lips. Let's get just paint. There we go, that's better. It's not as dark, it's going down. I'm getting shadow, but I'm also getting a sense of that form turning a little bit. If I go in a little darker with the background back here, it handles too fat. That's really good level of medium to paint. A lot less, and it just darkens and blends and softens all those edges back there. So when I go in with my color layers and my nice soft synthetic brushes and I lay on my color, this will have a chance to dry a little bit, set a little bit, depending if you want to take a break at this point, have some coffee. The key is get the drawing in, a little bit of the value structure, and keep things soft. But you notice how much I can push and pull things. So nothing's set. It's just experiment, explore. But that gives me a good start. I just noticed this pear, the shape is a little off. There.